White House has their new strategy. Just live with it. Don't complain. Pretend that 130,000 plus people haven't already died. Is this a good strategy? I don't think so, but man, do they need one, because Donald Trump's approval rating has been significantly hurt by his lack of interest in the pandemic, his lack of interest in protecting people, his ignorance of the science. Pew Research Center did a poll, and they found that Trump's approval is slipping fastest in the 500 counties where the number of cases have been more than 28 coronavirus deaths per 100,000 people. So I guess this isn't really shocking, but it is good to know that in the places that have been hardest hit by this pandemic, they do make the connection between the suffering they've seen firsthand and the people that have been responsible for that suffering. Let me give you a little bit more information. Pew surveyed voters in late March and the same people again in late June and found 17% of those who approved of the president in March now disapprove. So hey, isn't that progress? Dude presides over deaths that are rapidly approaching World War II battle deaths for America, and 17% are now disappointed in him.
Yeah,
That's
good.
crazy that it's that low, but it's better
Well,
than nothing, I guess.
but we're starting from his supporters, and his supporters are blindly following him. It doesn't really matter what he does. His supporters are there for a multitude of reasons, and most of which lead to white supremacy. I mean, they are not making rational choices in supporting this man. So it's going to take a lot to pull him away from there. I mean, it's going to take their own family being wiped out from coronavirus and then seeing that link. And that's not happening just yet, but it will happen when we see these numbers continue to rise. Everybody's going to know somebody that has died. Everybody's going to know somebody that's suffered.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I consider myself massively lucky that so far I don't know anyone that has had a significant case yet, let alone died, not personally. But let's talk a little bit about how this change in approval is working. The shift has come equally among Democrats and Republicans, men and women, and college graduates and non-graduates, but those who live in counties with a high number of virus cases were 50% more likely to say they no longer approve of Trump. So I feel the need to cover this because I want people to know that despite what it has seemed like from the beginning of this Trump thing, some people still hypothetically can be reached. It seems crazy that this is what it took, that they were there for that whole ride for years and still like Trump by March of this year, the whole thing. But some of them can be reached if enough tens of thousands of people die. And the reason that it's important is that if Donald Trump's strategy is to continue to not take this seriously and to do fundamentally even less than we already have to protect people, then it is likely that we will see more people die, and it will hurt him even more. It's a terrible strategy, pragmatically.
It's really bad. It's really bad, and it's really sad that it's taking people to suffer and die to change, his constituents' minds as to the job that he's doing. But I never thought I would say this, but I think Trump needs a political strategist even more than he needs a makeup artist at this point, because here was an opportunity for you to lead. Here was an opportunity for you to actually win people over, being the leader that this country needed. And not only did you fumble that ball, but then you continue down this path and not acknowledging your own mistakes. I mean, this is a very flawed, unhappy man inside, to not be able to sit back and reflect, and to have self-actualization. Like, he is so far from that. It's upsetting.
Yeah.
The emperor has new clothes.
Yeah. And by the way, I see a comment from Anani Moose who says, talk about how COVID-19 affects Black and brown communities far more than other communities. And that's 100% right. And especially important in terms of analyzing this polling data, because the effect has been seen largely equally across political and racial groups. And that is with Republicans having been mostly demographically insulated from the worst of coronavirus so far. And even with that, some of them are seeing how big of a failure this has been. Can you imagine if there wasn't the effect of systemic racism being transmitted through our public health system and the way that the deaths have been so unequal?
Yeah, I mean, and it doesn't exist in a vacuum, right? It's not just the public health system. It's, the education system. It's the prison system. It's all of these industries that are meant to oppress.
Yeah.
And, Black and brown communities are affected not only because they don't have the access to healthcare that other, more privileged groups do, they are in the lower socioeconomic stratus as well. And that is intentional. Mm-hmm. So it's not just your ethnicity that is making you more susceptible to this virus. It's your economic situation, which is tied into, how this country operates and who it exploits.
Yeah. And
so it's not surprising to see that Black and brown people, but we're going to also see disproportionately poor people affected by this.
100%. And poor people who have lost tons of jobs, tens of millions, got so little help during the initial rounds of legislation. And even that is going to seem great in comparison to the lack of interest that largely both parties seem to have in doing a renewal of those sorts of supportive funds.
How sad that people are excited about $1,200.
If you even got it.
If you even got it.
If you were lucky enough to get it.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.